First thing I have is I want to talk about what was mentioned in the PDF with the distal bicep soreness. This is the idea with the bicep. So let's just take them into the initial move. Landon, initial move looks really good. Leg lift, really good. I like the leg lift cross, dude. Anytime we can cross, it gives us more acceleration space to go with our lead leg. And at 12 years old, dude, it's really impressive that you can maintain a linear line. And I mean, it's really impressive. You can do a lot of things because more often times than not, when you give somebody, that much space to accelerate their lead foot, there's going to be a ton of, compensations from instability issues when you're that young, right? You're trying to move linear, which is going to be a huge emphasis on your core to stabilize you as you go. Dude, you're doing a lot of things really well. But then getting into the bicep idea, all right? So if you were just to sit here, let's get you at full anchor point. There you go. If you were to sit here, right, and flex your bicep. So see how as we flex our bicep, our wrist turns inward, and then this is supination, this is pronation. As I pronate my wrist, my bicep relaxes, and then as I supinate, it comes in, pronate, boom, it disconnects, right? It just relaxes. So this is the idea behind our fingers, our hands, our wrists playing into the contraction of certain muscles in our arm, the contraction of specific muscle groups that aren't supposed to be contracted at times of which we're releasing energy, right? Think about the whip, right? So if our arm's a whip, dude, we want to be as loose as possible without so much thinking of like a contraction. So when our wrist goes fully here or fully here, forearm in pronation is going to be contracted heavily right here. And then boom, as I supinate, bicep, right? And these are just pieces of the arm that happen as we turn our wrist. Okay, so boom, forearm, boom, bicep. So I see a lot of times when we look at, just picture an anchor point, right? And you look at the wrist, boom, and it looks kind of like you're turned inward, right? So as your wrist is turned inward, that's what's going to then flex the bicep. And now your bicep is involved more in your overall throw, just to put it simply, right? And then same thing for guys that land and their wrist is pointing towards second. This was me. In my career, I had a move where I would land and my wrist would be pointing towards second, like an aggressive pronation of my wrist, which would activate my inside of my forearm to be contracted during this throw that was getting so much energy from the entire chain. And if there's any sort of like big time muscle engagement there, right, we're not going to have that flow of energy come out as efficiently as it could. And we're probably going to put more stress on, parts of our arm that shouldn't really necessarily be putting stress on, like the bicep, right? So a lot of times with bicep issues, it's more of like looking at the landing. Again, I'm big on the wrist. I like a stiff wrist. I look at the wrist positioning all the way from the hand separation. So good here. And then as you start to then retract, you can see it starts to then loop, right? And it just gets a little flexed. And I think if we flex, like if our wrist is flexing upon our arm swing here, then as we anchor down and then pull through, like what you do here, it's going to be hard to alleviate the bicep from not contracting because you've been contracted the entire throw. And then B, the fingers, right? So if our wrist is flexed as we come through, and then as we start to accelerate our arm and we get into that layback phase, that the wrist being a little bit loose, again, at 12 years old, this is going to happen, but the wrist being pretty loose, now it's going to make it hard for us to then get on top of the baseball as our arm gets into this layback here. And let me just say, the amount of layback, Landon, that we have here is more than a lot of people that I work with. And there's just a idea behind the capacity you have, right? So external shoulder rotation, the layback of the elbow. If you have the ability to do that, just know that there's going to be a lot of need to make sure the postures and the alignments are fine-tuned and we can handle the amount of force that's coming up through the chain. Okay, so again, don't take that for like, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing in the world. I just think, it's going to be something, especially as a young kid, dude, the motor patterns that we're instilling are so sensitive that, we just do a lot of preset. You'll see a lot of stuff in the report for drill progressions moving forward. And I know it's monotonous, but the drill progressions where we preset a 90 or we preset a specific angle of the hands, right? Equal opposite, down, up, whatever. Just make sure that we're paying a bit attention to not only the wrist positioning in terms of like supination and pronation, the angle of the wrist in relation to the forearm, right? So you want that all essentially linear as we go into our throw. So although I would sit here and say the arm action, like I love the arm action, dude, this is in terms of the mechanics of things, right? Glove side extends, drive leg loads, lead leg's coming down, hands coming up, boom, pulls in. Super freaking good here, dude, like with the connection. I just think now if our wrist is kind of floppy, it's going to, like I said earlier, it's going to be hard to get on top of the ball. And it's going to be hard to just overall alleviate the bicep from really wanting to be engaged. I have a picture here. Go to the desktop. Joe Ryan. I'll show a video as well, but this is a good image here of Joe Ryan. And you can see that the wrist, the fingers, the forearm, they're all in one singular line, right? And even though the fingers aren't tense around the ball, obviously it's like an egg. We want looseness. Always think about like the whip in that regard, right? The whip cannot be tense or else it won't allow for that. You know what I'm saying? Very interesting concept to think about. Simple stuff like that when we do our preset, because these motor patterns are just going to be fine-tuned, as we get going. And it's going to be something that you just create a motion memory for as you continue to grow up, right? But right now, I think that's what's causing the bicep stuff because of the bicep being engaged as we go into our throw. And the next thing, the lead leg block. I love where we're at with the segmentation of things, right? In terms of creating rotational energy, hips into rotation, torso new. Gosh darn it, dude. This is impressive. So hips into rotation, torso neutral. We're freaking launching from stretch, right? We're building a lot of energy. I really like it. And just in this position here, right? If we can just kind of make sure our wrist is in a better posture, not flexed. Because again, here inside, bicep engaged. Boom, here outside, forearm engaged. We want to be right in the middle, neutral, right here in that Joe Ryan, neutral. So then forearm's not tense, biceps not tense. And then everything that comes from the arm speed is coming from the amount of rotational energy we can get, like in this position here. And then the release just pulls the arm through, right? And it's more organic than it would be to have the bicep engaged. And then as we go pull through, now it's fighting that, right? So again, the arm action is probably going to be our biggest thing. That's what I'm going to have in the report. It's going to be one singular piece for arm action progressions, but it's going to be two major emphases, right? Wrist posture, preset positions, again, monotonous stuff, but be diligent with it for a month, right? Work at it, be intentional with it for like a month straight. And then, like I said, dude, it's going to just happen like where the motion memory just kind of comes in. Then the second major emphasis is the arm deceleration. So arm deceleration, the arm can only accelerate as much as it can decelerate. Okay. So anchor, boom, everything's great, pull through. And this isn't necessarily like a huge, breakdown. I will say as we get into this release, this is what I was kind of referring to. If our wrist is flexed and loose and pointed either outward, inward, whatever, it's going to be hard to get on top. You can see how the fingers get a little bit under the ball. I know this video ain't the best representation of that, but if we start having a lot of misses that you can feel your fingers under and it pushes the ball upwards, that's going to be that wrist thing. So I think the preset, it's always a fine line because I'm sitting here saying like we want to preset, make sure these things are locked in or whatever. But I don't want you to think that the preset is a move that you have to like be tense in. The idea is to like create this looseness and then just be like, boom, wrist, forearm, one, fingers are loose, ball's loose, right? Boom, here we go. All right, now we go into our throw.